Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 18 of This Valorant Life. Thanks for joining Adam and myself. Today, we're going to be jumping into Breeze, into our Breeze deep dive, everyone's favorite beach map that was out of the rotation and is now back, that had the halls taken out, and now they've added the halls back. So, with that, let's jump in. Adam, Breeze is a much larger map than the other maps. Um, just at a high level, we're going to get into lots of detail, but how does that affect how you think about this map?
Yeah. It is a really large map, and I think like because it's so big, the rotates are like really important. Like if you just quickly think about split, for example, the map's a little bit smaller, the rotate points are a little bit more connected in mid. Breeze, you don't really have that, so your decisions are a little bit more important.
Mm,
For example, if you decide to kind of like rush something and then you get canceled, that's gonna take a long time for you to get back to the other bump site, and the other team will probably match your pacing or even beat you there. So it's more so about, I think, playing like a strong, slow game for both halves, and being a more intentional, I guess, with what map control you're taking, because you can't act reactively as well.
so what I'm hearing is there's like an element both on offense and defense of being able to full commit to your decisions, right? Like, I think Hooge talks about sometimes on pistol rounds that you sell out. You don't expect a fake until they show you a fake. Like, I hear there's like an element of like if they're hitting B, like you cannot be waiting. Like you need to just be rotating as if your life depends on it.
That's a very good point. Yeah. You don't you don't really have the idea of like rotating late on
Yeah.
Breeze compared to some of the other maps. Because if you're anchoring A and they're planning B, by the time you get over there, the round's gonna be it's gonna
Yeah.
be over. So you have to be a little bit more
Yeah.
active on your rotate there for sure, 100%.
And then the other part, and I don't know the answer to this question or what you think about it, but the the rotate then the control of mid and the ability for either a lurk to really blow up a rotate or even just the ability to rotate through mid, like controlling mid then on offense and on defense is like pretty powerful because of the more direct rotates you get.
Correct. Yeah. And this is kind of where attackers have a little bit more leverage compared to defense. If you try to do an A split and it gets canceled, you can really quickly cancel that call, and you won't be able to rush B off of that, but you might be able to just reset and like control the rotates a little bit more. And maybe that, like, because Halls is
Yeah.
back now, during the iteration when it was gone, that made mid like even more
Yeah.
powerful. But now that Halls is back, it makes it even harder for defenders because it's an extra lane. And maybe I can kind of just draw the
Yeah.
example real quick. So I'm going to pretend like we're going A. And this will cause rotates to go over towards A, right, on defense
Yep.
side. So normally Sovos kind of play over here. I'm going to draw this rotate over. He's going to get onto A site, right? As soon as this kind of A hit is canceled, let's just say like the red arrow comes back here, and then maybe they can get into nest or even just catch like a little bit of timing where they just are sitting mid here. And this is very like annoying for the Sova, because if he's on site and he comes back like to bridge, if Halls didn't exist, he would be fine. He can kind of just go back into here and like reclaim the space. But now that Halls exists, like if a Viper is lurking up here, he has to be scared of that, right? So now there's a Viper could be here, and there could potentially be, in this example, a Phoenix here. So it's very dangerous to kind of like rotate and come back when all of these players can kind of be in your face. And again, that's because the map is very large, but also because like that mid / Halls danger completely impacts the defender's rotate. So it's really annoying to be playing defense Breeze, I think, if the attackers are playing really slow and playing a good map control.
The other thing I'm noticing just with the geometry is that on balance, way easier for attack to control mid than defense.
Yeah, they got rid of like the left side pillar as well. So something that defenders used to do is they would walk down on the left side of mid here, and then they would be able to take a fight. But because that's not part of the map anymore, it's very straightforward for attackers to kind of just go out, and all they have to do is control mid doors, right? So if you control mid doors, you can't really die to anything because they can't push you on your left side. And the easiest way to do that is just either poison orbing it or darting it. Those are your two common. But typically, if you're going to poison orb mid, I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit, but the poison orb mid plus the dart kind of just gives attackers instant mid control. And there's not really much that defenders can do aside from, you know, swinging mid doors for a kill or controlling elbow instead. So yeah, it's very attacker sided in terms of mid control.
Cool. So now that we've kind of gone over the map size, I think because of the map size and the amount of like long range fights that we have on Breeze, one thing I wanted to ask you about is, you know, does that change gun value? You know, I think we had talked about this before, but like, you know, a Marshall on most maps is a very situational, maybe a half buy weapon or a weapon sometimes you buy when you win your pistol. But how do you think about that for Breeze?
To give an example from like a really high level player, it will really nail this idea down. So Eggster, he's a Yoru main. When he loses pistol, he'll buy the Marshall. You won't really ever see that from any player on any map or on Duelist, like on any other map. So the fact that that's something that happens on Breeze should hopefully highlight the fact that long range duels and long range guns are very strong. And it's to the point to where if you lose pistol and you buy 5 Marshalls, you might actually have a better chance to win the round compared to the other team because they aren't really expecting it. So yeah, the long range weapons is super good. And like you mentioned, the geometry, there's just very long lanes, right? Like, you know, back A site, this lane is very long. Halls obviously is like probably the best example of this. It's just very advantageous to use these weapons. And this is also why it feels very, I guess, claustrophobic if you ever play against a good jet hopper on this map. There's not really much you can do. You could try to use util, but if they're smart, they will avoid it because there's only a limited amount of util and they'll still get value. So yeah, incredibly broken.
And so as we think about it then, so, you know, on those save rounds, kind of, I don't know, I'm just throwing this out there. Is it kind of more troll to be, you know, on a light buy buying a sheriff? Like if you're going to be buying a sheriff, you might as well just be buying a Marshall.
Yeah, that's pretty much the general consensus. Unless you like, you know, suck at the Marshall, which I do. I will admit I'm one of the sheriff buyers. But at the very least, I never buy Buckies or Stingers in this map.
How does ADSing change because of the long range fights? Like, how do you think about that? Are you only ADSing because you're yay? Or like, where would you use it? Does it change in value because of the length of the engagements you're having?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess I'll start in the reverse. The value is definitely higher on this map compared to, say, Split, where it's a lot more close range engagements. Just increasing your first bullet accuracy, I don't know if people know, but if you ADS, your first bullet accuracy actually increases. And your bullets go directly where your crosshair is, compared to having a little bit more spread. Like, you know, if you're controlling your spray, at a certain point, your bullets go above your crosshair. But I believe when you ADS, your bullets just go where your crosshair is at all times. So because of that, you will be able to hold angles a lot easier. And also if you peek into like very narrow angles, like just think about the Halls fight, for example. This is a fight you want to take ADS because you want the accuracy and it's a very narrow hall. So you aren't going to be doing much flicking. So yeah, I guess another thing I'll add with the ADS thing is you kind of want to bias it towards holding. Peeking with the ADS is something that you'll see, you know, for example, Ye do a little bit more. But from my experience, it's kind of like a hard technique and I don't really encourage many people to do it. So yeah, for the most part, try to like keep it towards holding angles or something like that. Yeah.
Let's jump into the typical comp then. What, just, you know, for us to be able to have something to work off of, what would a typical comp look like in your mind?
Yeah, super straightforward here. You have like a core of, you know, a few agents, Viper being the main controller. You need the wall. Then Sova's typically the most prominent initiator. He's the best initiator to kind of push off the op.
Because he can shoot his recon long range.
Yes. And the drone has sight compared to like a Skydog. After that, now that Halls is back open, you do kind of want to trip. So I would recommend either Cypher or Chamber. In ranked, you can get away with either because Chamber is a solid hopper. But I would you know, Cypher is pretty
Yeah.
incredible, especially with that B trip. So this is probably your core 3 right here. Everything else is kind of bonus. You know, you could argue that Jet should be part of the core 3, and I would say she's very close. I would rather have a Jet over a Cypher in my games, but my assumption would be in the lower ranks, you're going to have a lot harder time dealing with gaps. So just having the extra tripwire is nice. And then, you know, the 5th agent is you could play whatever. You could play double controller, you could play double duelist, you could play double initiator. It really doesn't matter. So we'll just leave it at that as the core 4.
Okay. Let's maybe just throw, I don't know, throw KO as the last one then.
Sure.
So we have someone to talk about.
KO. Yep.
Of all of these, like let's say the core comp, is it really not possible to play this map without Viper?
You know, I feel like it might be possible up to a certain rank, but you're definitely at a huge disadvantage. Because if we can kind of just draw it 1-to-1, for example, this is the normal B wall, which means that it blocks off tunnel in the arch peak or half wall. You can't do that with a normal controller, right? Like if you try omen smoking this, you're gonna have gaps, right? It's not gonna work. So typically, if you do play like a non-Viper controller, your smokes are just gonna be for this cross, which means that you won't be able to take this backside swing here because you'll be peeking into arches, right? If this wall didn't exist, so it's definitely a lot harder.
So let's talk about what is there a typical default on this map? Let's go on to the attack side.
Sure. We alluded to the mid control earlier. That probably is your strongest default. I would probably recommend that you dart for the mid walk down, something like this. Sometimes you'll see the dart on the left side instead. I don't really know which one's better, I'm gonna be honest, but I've seen both. And then you have the Viper Orb in either mid door, nest, or halls. It's a little bit elusive because the mid door orb looks like it's in halls, but just know that's for mid door. Out of these 3, I would probably recommend the halls one the most. Nest, you can kind of just fight. You can't really fight halls. That's like very hard to fight. And mid doors, you know, you can kind of fight that too. So if I had my choice, this would be my default. I would send my Viper halls every round with the orb. And then I would send my Sova with like, you know, some like Jet maybe to go mid. And then everyone after that is kind of whatever. Maybe Cypher can go up B. If Cypher does go B, typically they will do like the camera here. If you're getting really high level, they also do this cage to put the camera so that it threatens the cross and the guy that pushing B main is a little bit harder. But you don't really see this cage even in high elo all too often.
So let's just talk about that orb. You know, I'm gonna throw out that the reason that orb is so important and the reason you're leaning into it as preferential is because it really forces them to play honest and to have to keep control of halls. Like they can't just peek it or jump peek it. Like they actually have to be worried that your Viper is actually moved up to this cubby.
And maybe more importantly, they can open the door without being contested. And like, it's actually insane how many times you can open this door and kill a player on A because they have no idea what's going on. Like during like an A execute or an A split, for example, it's very hard for the A site player to keep track of what's going on. And then with the door opening like that, they typically just don't notice it. And it's just a free kill. So the orb just allows attackers to control the door, which is very, very powerful. And on top of that, you do get the sightline into the rotate. So it forces all of defenders to rotate spawn side instead of going up bridge and rotating like this or here. So they can't even go to nest.
Well, I think, and you hear any rotates through doors or double doors into mid.
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
So very good. Very good.
So then let's talk about A site then. What does the typical A site execute look like?
Yeah, so this is pretty straightforward. Let me just draw this over. Typically you'll do this with a 4-1. So what that means is you have 4 players here and then you'll send one player somewhere else. So in this case, it's normally your sentinel that goes lurks, goes in lurks. As for the utility, standard A wall, there's a slight variation in a lot of them. Sometimes people would throw it on the right side of this little corner, which I'll draw an arrow here. Sometimes they'll throw it on the left side of the corner here. Sometimes it's flush with the corner. There's a little bit of different reasonings for all of them, but just know that the most neutral one is just flush with the corner. Throwing it right or left is depending on if they have an op or not, and you want extra space. And the most extreme example would look something like this, where it's completely lets you take back right. But flush with the corner is the most common. After that, your Sova will ideally dart close. Darting close is really important because defenders can kind of take that early duel. And now that cave doesn't exist, you kind of have to use util early on to keep them honest. After that, the drone just goes, clears whatever space. I like the pathing of the drone to go right side, but sometimes I'll see people go over the wall too for the tag. Not bad either. And then your jet just goes out with the dash, and then dashes here, and they just continue backside. So that's pretty much the most standard execute.
Okay, let me ask what happens on site first. So oftentimes, everyone will kind of funnel in. There'll be maybe like 1 or 2 people here. Maybe there's one guy here. Is there a need to go and take this space?
So there are specific rounds where it's really nice to take yellow space, but I would say in the majority of cases, you won't be able to coordinate it, and it's a lot harder to do so because most defending players like to play yellow or stairs, and it's a very heavy rotate spot. So in other words, there is it's high risk, high reward is the best way I can explain it. So if you can pull it off, you will pretty much always win the round if you take yellow space. But more often than not, you won't be able to.
Okay. Where are the, actually maybe one more thing before we can get into plants and post plants is how does Halls play into this?
Yeah. So if you do end up doing just a Hall split, let's say you're a Viper through the wall and then she immediately went to go Halls, because you can put the wall in the pre-round. You can throw the Hall and then just run up and do it. And then this will allow you to execute out A. Now there's a timing thing here. When your teammates go out, they need the wall. But when you're opening the door, you should now drop the wall so the Viper can see the player backside. And it's like, because the attackers control the dynamic of the wall going up and going down, you can have a very strong pinch to where, say, this Gecko is here. If that wall was up, the Sova wouldn't be able to fight this Gecko, correct? But if you drop the wall, boom, wall gone. Easy crossfire, and then you can full clear backside. So that's the main appeal of Halls here, is it allows you to clear this back lane a little bit better. And that's very important when you play against like a Jet Opper or maybe even like a Cypher that's back there with trips. It just completely ruins the A-hold. And yeah, if you can, going Halls is really good. And I guess that's something that I kind of glossed over with this 4-1 here with the Cypher. The Cypher could very well easily just go Halls alone as well if he doesn't want to do it with the Viper. And then he'll kind of just throw his cages and work it himself. There's a camera he can throw on like a little tree here that sees the Halls angle, and he can kind of tap it as he walks up. But yeah, good point. Halls, very strong. It's better than the mid to A because mid to A, you can obviously die from the mid guy. So Halls feels a little bit safer.
And then in terms of timing then, like you would, if let's say if this Viper is stuck in this cubby, you've got wall up, your team's executing, you would, as they, I'm just trying to think this out, as their backside here, and you're trying to pinch on, let's say, this Gecko, then you would orb up, open door, drop wall.
Correct. That is the ideal timing, yeah.
Typical plant location is here?
Yeah, so there's a few, I guess there's a few nuances to the plant spot. The one that you put here is definitely the most ideal. But unfortunately, if you are in higher ranks, they might be aware of that and just spam you from the left side of the wall here. If that's the case, you might have to plant on the other side here, which means that you can't actually see the spike from main. So you're more likely going to play on site, which sucks, but that's kind of what you have to do if you want to get the bomb down. And if you want to kind of risk it all, you could actually just plant off-centered, like a little bit in this corner. So when they spam you, they're just spamming the wrong spot. But, you know, most ideally, you do plant front sight here. And if you feel the need to kind of push the left side of the wall, if you have a flash agent, you can just flash through the wall here and then try to take that fight to avoid the guy spamming you. And also, if there is a player here and there is a player spamming, you can kind of just time it off of their spam and get the kill and then plant after anyways. So
And the reason this is preferential is that you can see it from this ideal post plant spot. It's ideal because you can see it from cave, and you could see it from like a late lurk mid.
correct. And I believe, I'm not sure if this is the case, but you used to be able to see it on this ledge in mid as well, where you could shoot them in the toes. I don't know if that's changed now, actually.
Okay. Wow, like way back there.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It used to be a crazy, like there's a clutch from Shifter, he's an ex League of Legends pro, and he was I think his play was like he threw the molly from outside A where he's standing now, and then he ran to mid, like let's say here or something, and then he threw another molly, and then like he jumped up here, like it was like a crazy rat play. But yeah, it can be pretty good. The open plant there.
He was Dignitas, I think, right? Was he?
I believe so. Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Does he still play Valorant?
I think so.
Okay. Cool.
I think so. He's like a Mortal 3 or
Oh
something.
wow. Okay. Good for him. So then, that's the post plant for A then.
Right. You kind of just fight, but if it's planted for main, you can play off site. If it's planted on site, you probably want to have like, I don't know, 1 or 2 players here. Well,
do you like this spot here? Like this spot here, like just underneath these boxes?
Oh, Tetris is very good if you can get there. Like if you have like a player come up mid.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of hard to control that space, to be honest.
Okay. Let's cycle over to B then. So what does a typical execute look like for B? And maybe as we talk about this too, like you're probably going to show us the default Viper wall. What's the argument between defaulting your Viper wall to A versus always just putting the Viper wall on the site you're hitting?
Man, that's a good question. The way Breeze works is it feels very hard to hit a site when you don't have the wall. So the argument for not putting your wall default A is just so you can actually hit B if you need to later in the round. Like if you're doing a mid control default, for example. The counter argument to that is if you did do the default wall A every round, then you can put a lot of pressure there. And there are actually some pretty decent lurk setups, even now, where you can kind of put the wall here and an orb back here, and you can kind of just walk out bricks.
Oh, that's almost like the way that Nat's old team before he was Gambit.
Yes.
That's how Gambit played Bind. It would like wall.
Yes. I actually stole this from that.
Okay. Yeah. So like wall in orb and then just walk out.
Yes. It's super good. And I guess that's a little tidbit on the A execute. If your Viper doesn't want to go halls and the enemy jet has an op, you could use this orb to kind of close the distance. And that's very good too. But yeah, that would be the counter argument to defaulting your wall. You put a lot of A pressure. But typically you'll see that only in games where you have double controller. Because then you can kind of like get away with using the secondary smoke on B. And you'll typically see it like on the cross here. Otherwise it is really hard. Okay. So hopping over to the B execute, I'm going to move the cipher here. You have a couple of variations with the wall, to be honest. You can either throw it kind of flush with the half wall. You can throw it slightly angled to cover a left side box. And you can also throw it much closer to close the distance. There's a lot of argument to all of them, but just for the sake of simplicity, I will recommend the left side wall is probably the better to get rid of that box angle. If you're on an eco buy, then doing close walls, I see the appeal. And just doing the flush one here, I don't throw it. I don't want to deal with the box. So yeah. As for everything after that, it's super important if you play against a Cypher, your Silva needs to shock dart this trip. Because I don't know if you guys seen it, but the trip now goes across from here to here. So it's actually physically impossible for you to walk out. Like let's say you try to shift walk out B main. It's physically impossible for you to break the trip because the edges of the trip are so far away. Like you can't see it until you actually activate the trip. So in other words, if you go B without breaking the trip, you are guaranteed to die.
Okay.
So yeah, you need the shock, or I guess if your jet can updraft dash over it, but then that means she's the only player to get over it, which is really annoying. So yeah, you have to break the trip. If you don't break the trip, you're not going to win the B execute. After that, your Sova will either drone or dart. It honestly doesn't really make a difference, to be honest. But the dart typically lands backside, and the drone you'll typically do the clear close left. Again, doesn't really make much of a difference. As long as you can kind of make it through the trip, number one, or number two, if you're playing against a Viper, you beat the orb plus Molly combo. And
what do you mean you beat the orb plus Molly combo?
Yeah, so I have a specific clip, which actually, should I show my screen and show it?
We can just add it in post.
We can add it in post. Okay. So basically, defenders will have the orb on B main here, and they will sit on top of the ledge with Molly out. And as soon as they hear noise, they will throw the Molly and pop the orb. And if attackers aren't able to make it past that, the execute is pretty much dead, because the Vipers should be able to like 3K or ace on the site hold here. And if you're quick enough, like let's say you shift walk up and you know that Cypher's not playing there, then you can, instead of throwing the shock dart to telegraph that you're executing, you can just throw the dart and then explode, and then you might be able to beat them all.
Got it.
And that's really important. Because
this bit of the like rock paper scissors here. That's the Nats play, right?
Yes.
Like he sits on that wall every round.
Correct.
What does pathing look like? Do you is it important, you think, to path like this and then wrap backside, or should we be pathing like kind of backside first?
That's a great question. I'm kind of in the camp of avoiding this backside. I kind of like your first one, either going like this way and then jumping up to clear backside, or going all the way around to kill the guy that's.
Why is your preference that way?
Because like the angle, like if the Viper is back here, they have like a huge advantage on the guy that swings, and it's just very difficult. But if you like go through mid sight first and then jump up, number one, you can kind of avoid some mollies or tripwires, or like sometimes Cyphers will have cages there, so you can kind of avoid util. But number two, they just don't, like, it's hard to pre-aim the jump up. So the Viper in this case is a little bit more dialed in on the ISO rather than say the Jet if he were to jump up.
What makes that fight advantage for the Viper looking down this back lane here?
Yeah, there's a few reasons. Number one, they can actually full tuck behind this box and then just wait and then peek out, which means that if this ISO wants to clear the Viper, they have to hold W, so you can catch the ISO in a W peek. And number two, it's also like in terms of pre-aiming, the Viper only has to look at the ISO, but the ISO has to look at the deep angle as well, which can be problematic in a guessing game.
Cool. Where is typical post plant?
Yeah, typical post plant, pretty straightforward actually. You just control this back lane. So let me get rid of the ISO. You might have a player in this cubby. I don't actually know what people call this cubby, but you could play people there, and then you typically have someone back here and then someone on this box. And then occasionally you will have a player pillar if they didn't reposition or they can't after the bomb plant. And this is kind of what your post plant looks like. And then
typical plant location is here?
Correct.
Right there?
Yep. Pillar, you can also bias it a little bit more left so your window player can see it a little bit easier. They don't have to peek as wide. But yeah, I think close to the box is also fine. I tend to do it here. There's like a little wood plank on the floor, and I like to plant on top of the wood plank.
How much does like, what are you doing about elbow? Either as a like in the post plant, are you controlling it? Is the window player controlling it? Like, how are you thinking about like this region?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it's a problem that still people in Radiant have troubles with. So I guess like my default answer would be just camming it. But as you can see, if the Viper throws the wall too far from the right, the cam gets covered, which is not ideal. So then the secondary solution would be to trip it, which you can do, but sometimes your Cyphers won't trip it either. So the next best answer is just to have a player sit here. And if you do have a player sit here, they will typically just be your window player to look for the flank and just hold it. Or At some point, they might even just come up late and take elbow. And then if they do end up going for that wrap play, it's a little bit more of a aggressive post plant because you can kind of pinch the tunnel players. Or like there's like a lull state here, for example, where defenders will kind of sit there for a second, and this Cypher, if they walk up elbow, can kind of dominate there. Yeah. But yeah, you do kind of want to have a player watch your elbow or push elbow because it can be very problematic.
Yeah. Okay. There's no world where you're pushing into McDonald's or Arches?
Not really. The most that you're going to push up is going to be here, like close half wall. And then you're kind of just playing the cycles of the Viper feel. But if you do end up pushing into Arches or McDonald's, you're probably just have like a crazy timing. It's like nothing standard, to be honest. Like maybe you have a read that like they're triple flanking A or they're triple pushing mid, then you can go for that timing. But like on most standard rounds, that's not really an option.
Okay. Maybe other than what we were talking about for mid before we got into attack, we're talking about that mid default. Is splitting it sounds like splitting is really like splitting through mid and hitting B, splitting through mid and hitting A is not really the play.
So I'm glad you brought that up. Splitting mid to hit B is pretty terrible. I don't recommend it. You're better off just doing straight B hits or whatever, like something else. But actually mid to A splits aren't bad. So Viper players pay attention. It's super easy. Start the round, molly mid doors, run up to the pillar, and then throw your wall from the pillar across and make sure you cover the yellow angle. You could also do it closer to the right here to get more of yellow. You can test around with what you prefer. But if you don't do the molly and cross mid first and you throw the wall from back here, your wall doesn't cover enough space. Like it's literally only for the A cross, and I hate that people do this. Just throw it from pillar instead so you get more space. If you are going to do a mid to A split like this, there's not really much reason to have a Halls player, but there is some valid reasoning for someone to go main. So make sure you have at least 1 or 2 players main. And it's definitely not bad. It's hard to do against an op because if this guy's opping back here, he has free reign essentially from picking around the pyramid. But if you're doing it against a gun round, it's pretty good.
Yeah, no, I've done that wall before. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
It gives you a lot of control sight. Are there any eco strats that you like to do on attack?
Yeah. Easiest one is A, do a super tight wall like this. Everyone groups up at the end here and then they just run through. And then most of the time you'll be able to kill the backside player. At the very least, you're going to get the bomb plant down. So a super tight wall on A. You could also do a super tight wall on B and try to do a similar thing. It's just a little bit harder to get out of the B choke in my experience, but you could definitely try. And the last thing would just be like a Halls thing where you all just run up Halls together, smoke this off, and then open the door. And sure, the argument is like you're playing against long range duels, but sometimes they just get caught off guard and you can win the classic. If you want to take it a step further, you just go through the orb here and then you try to fight the nest player. So yeah, one of those 3.
Cool. Jumping right clicks with your classic. Cool. I think that's all I had for attack. Let's maybe move over to defense. So we'll flip the map. Let's talk about the bomb sites, or maybe let's actually talk about typical setup first. What does the typical setup look like for defense side?
Very straightforward. If you have the Cypher plays B because the Cypher trip's insane at B, in which case that automatically puts your Viper on A. If your Viper is playing A, the best wall to throw would probably be this one. You can contest mid a little bit. You can angle it so that there's that gap by the box, which means that this player, the Viper, can actually hide here if they do a mid to A and they don't actually expect it. Pretty cheese wall, but it contests mid and it also stops them from rushing A. So very crucial wall. And then everyone else is kind of just fill. So sometimes you have your Silva be hall monitor. Your Jet will maybe control elbow, but the Jet will primarily float. But if your Jet can control elbow, great. And then if you do play the KO, your KO will play mid doors and knife towards B. Yeah. Standard here. B hold super easy with the Cypher. The Sova will rotate from Halls to throw a dart up here. And then if the Jet is around, then the Jet will either push elbow or come back and help. As for the A hold,
well, let's
again,
stay on B. So let's say they're hitting B.
Sure.
This is the current setup. Is Cypher trying to play his life? Is he willing to fall off site? Is he playing off his trips? Like, how do we think about B in terms of what's okay to give up and what we feel not okay giving up?
Great question. Your site anchor on any bomb site for any map should ideally be playing to hold. So let's start with that lens first. With that being the case, your Cypher should either be playing ledge or back right, kind of where the camera is currently, and they should be trying to get as many kills as possible. That's option number one. If they're getting double, like they're playing against double dive duelist, or like the enemy Sova is breaking the trip and they can't particularly hold the choke that well, then they should play either further back here, or if they have the crazy one-way tech, they could play closer and then try to play that. But realistically, you're probably going to play back here, and you're looking to get a few kills, or like a few fights, maybe one kill, and stay alive. But you probably won't stay alive that long here. But this is your second option if you're playing against double dive duelist. I personally find it completely unacceptable if I ever see my Cypher or my Viper playing half wall, because then you're in a B retake, and I hate B retakes. So you can definitely voice that you should not be playing half wall. Unless you have like some godly kill trips and you have like really good retake ults and you're confident in it. But in ranked, it's a very rare assumption to make. So yeah, half wall, no, on site, good.
Okay.
In my opinion.
When you are retaking on B after they've planted, is there anything specific that you're thinking about?
Good question. So I guess we could kind of walk through the angles a little bit. The scary angle, and I guess I'll just put them with some red X's here, is this box, and then the pillar swing. And this, I really don't know what the people call that corner, but that corner on the left there is, very lethal. So if you can kind of do anything about those three angles, you're looking decent. You could extend that to this angle or even half wall, but I personally don't really see them as much of a threat. So typically when I B retake, I'm very wary of those three X's. If you don't have a smoke for main, then you can also include that, because this guy back here can have pretty deep sight lines and be very safe, especially if he's opping. So if you don't have anything for that, I would add that. But most generally, those are the three X's I'm looking at. And if I have a dart, I'll try to use the dart to kind of clear back right. If I have a molly, I will maybe use it to clear this. If I have smokes, I might, like if I'm playing Jet, I might use smokes to kind of like cross a little bit just to avoid those angles. So the most important thing to know really of anything Valorant related is like what your threats are and what you can use your util to kind of get rid of those threats. So it's not really agent specific in that case, but just knowing that those are your threats.
Okay. Cool. Let's move over to A then. How do you handle a site execute?
So very straightforward. If your Viper is playing really well, then they will play on site back here, and all they have to do is just throw a molly somewhere here, and then they're staying alive. If they're playing fully tucked here, they might just play more for kills. If they're playing back here, they're doing molly plus delay strategy. If your Sova's playing hall monitor, they will rotate over and throw a dart for your A player to get spam kills. If your KO is here, and he still has knife, the knife will completely kill the hit, and because Viper wall goes down, Sova drone goes down, Jet can't dash out, which is why KO is so good on this map. If it's not a KO and it's more of like a normal agent, and they're like say Reyna don't have much util, they're more so about just playing on this left side here to deny bomb plant or deny any pushes. So you can spam, you can hold the wall push. If they're really crazy, because the defending Viper has this wall, you can see the intersection here. You can actually go through the wall here and then hold kind of where that intersection meets. This is like a very advanced tactic, but if you get the kill as Reyna, you can get the kill here at the intersection if they push through the wall and then dismiss out and go backside. Correct. So without that wall, you don't have that option, right? So if your Viper's not playing A, you can't do that as Reyna. You're probably just going to play back here and just maybe reinforce the Viper backside. But that is why this defender wall is so
Where does
important.
Viper throw her smoke?
The smoke orb. Now that Halls is open, there's a one way you can do in Halls to deal with that. You could also one way the mid door thingy, or you could just put it on the floor. Those are typically the two best orbs. There is the argument that you actually throw the one way. It's actually very easy to do. It's on a Huja's video, but essentially just stand in this corner and aim at a thing. If you do opt for this, then you're probably not going to use this AWOL.
Yeah, you can save
much.
it
So
for
you might save
retake B, or throw it up if they push through the one way.
the orb, correct? Yeah. And that's definitely a good option too. My personal preference actually is to play with the orb because retake B is trash. So if I am playing Viper, I will kind of just retake B from tunnel by throwing the wall like this, or I'll do it to like vertical like this to kind of get rid of those X's we talked about, and then I'll scale on the right side and then get close. So yeah, now that you pointed it out, it might be actually higher conversion for players in ranked to either use the one-way orb or just the default orb and hold the choke and then save the wall for the B retake.
Cool. Usually this site, there's no way to stay alive if they're hitting site. You're either going to get your kills and win or get your kills and die, because there's not like lots of places to hide backside. In the retake, is there anything specific that you're trying to do?
Great question. Retake A is probably one of the highest conversion retakes in the game.
Why is that?
Just to give a stat. So yeah, there's only a few spots that you can stand. Here, and then bricks. And then if A main is smoked off, there's nothing there. And then on top of that, we talked about the plant spot, right? So if you're a good defending player, then you force them to plant here, right? They can't plant for mid, which means that theoretically, if you just clear this one X and you get on the spike, you can actually just full stick the defuse. And then if you have teammates behind you just holding you, then you win, right? So theoretically, the win condition for the attacking post plant is to hold the area where the spike exists, right? But it's very easy to clear out this X. All you have to do is throw a molly there, and if you coordinate that with the shock dart, they insta die. But otherwise, you can just throw the molly, and more often times than not, the players will move anyways, and you'll just win. So, yeah, that's the main reason is the plant spot. You can't really play it from other spots. So if they plant there and you clear the X, and then you get on spike, you can pretty much just win, pretty much every time. If they do plant here on the deeper X, it's a little bit harder to win as a defender, but it's still not bad. Same thing, you throw the molly, and then if you have your dart, you can also clear both spots, bricks and let me put those X's back. Both of these X's get cleared by the dart. And again, you're looking pretty. You just have to now worry about the mid wrap or the spam from A main, but that's a lot more reasonable to deal with compared to the B retake, for example.
Are players lurking at all on this map?
Yes. The Halls Lurk, very scary, right? Halls Lurk, the mid door Lurk is very scary.
I meant on
Sometimes
defense.
you actually die.
Like walking out.
Oh. Yeah, so sometimes you will have your jet. If your jet controls elbow, you'll typically either push through or you'll come back and try to kill the guy coming up late mid. So your jet is sometimes in that position. Sometimes your B anchor will be in that position too if they rotated late. Typically they will go through mid like this and then try to look for that mid lurker. So that's definitely an option. And maybe less frequently, you will have a player actually like deep in halls, either here or super deep like here, and then they will be going for flanks. That's more of like a jet tactic, and it's really good to do so. I guess that's something I didn't mention, but if you start the round on defense by pushing halls and playing this off angle, you can pretty much push and kill the guy that is coming up halls, because normally the Viper orb on attack lands here. So there's a timing. If you off barrier, if you run up, you can actually get into this corner before they see you, and then you can kind of deal with halls that way. But I guess that would kind of classify as a lurk to me, because you're not really fighting anything super intensive. You kind of just walk down halls, and then you can flank A that way.
Okay, and you're generally not taking. It's gonna be hard to take control of mid. You're not gonna really be like fighting nest.
Nest is a good one actually, but maybe I'll back up a little bit. The mid fight might consist of a Silver Dart. So the Silver Dart, typically Silvers will throw from Nest onto this little thing. It's like a patch of green. You can also throw it from mid doors. If you're doing this dart, sometimes your Jet will updraft onto this ledge at the start of the round to take that fight. Sometimes your Jet will also swing mid door with an op or something, and you can get those duels. But other than that, those two examples, you're not really going to contest mid aggressively. But you mentioned Nest, and actually this Cubby on the right here can be very good. If you hold the passive line here, the person peeking, I'll put an Reyna here, will typically be looking at tunnel. So they don't actually expect you Nest, and they just die. You're a pretty strong off angle. Otherwise, you can try to like timing hold the guy jumping up. Holding the jump up is, in this case, defender sided. So if you do have the angle, you would typically convert it. But other than those two, I guess maybe holding elbow from here, like you can do that too. But yeah, attackers should be able to deal with that Nest if they are ready for it.
Okay. Is there anything we missed that you feel like we need to talk about?
Maybe I just want to highlight real fast. Elbow is kind of something that I didn't highlight. We talked a lot about Halls and the importance of mid, but elbow in particular, it has a very strong like powerhouse on defense and attack. So for defense, if you control elbow, you can fast retake B, and actually retaking B from elbow by going through B main is a lot more higher conversion than retaking from tunnel, in my opinion. So that's number one. Number two is elbow is really important for attackers because on the B retake, I guess, in reverse, you can kind of mess with that. So yeah, elbow is a pretty big part of Breeze, and it's kind of hard to talk about it in, I guess, a macro perspective, but it is just big. Yeah.
So, like a power position.
Okay. Yes.
Cool.
And I would say that's it. Breeze is, that's the map.
Awesome.
It's not my favorite.
Well, thanks, Adam, and thanks everyone for joining us on this deep dive of Breeze. Next, I think it'll be a battle to the death between, I think we have Bind and Split left.
I think that's right.
So it'll be a fight to the death between those. We'll put up a community poll, and then we'll decide which one to do next. So until next time, thanks for joining us, everyone, and have a great day.
Peace out.